Hey guys, it's Will from the Back 40, and I hope you're having a great day. Well, I guess we can just come right out and say it. This is an I Told You So video. Of course, this is an update on the quote-unquote deal that was struck between certain Democrats in the Senate and the Republican Party to reopen the government with the promise from the Republicans that they would have a standalone vote on the extension of the ACA credits later this year. Now, I want to give everyone a reminder right up front that a couple of more votes have to happen before this becomes the case. So keep pouring those calls on to the Democratic senators that voted to go along with this quote-unquote compromise. It's still not too late to change one of their minds, and we only need to change one of their minds to prevent this from happening. But here's the bigger picture. If you remember the other day when I made a video condemning this quote-unquote compromise, I told you that there is no way, shape, or form that you can trust the Republicans to keep their word on a deal of this nature. And what's happened since then? Well, the first thing everyone needs to understand is that in order for this compromise to work, you can't just have an up or down standalone vote in the Senate. It's got to occur in the House as well. And then if by some reason the bill were to pass in both the House and the Senate, there'd need to be a compromise or a reconciliation that would go back to the Senate to be voted on again. And what's happened just in the last couple of days? Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, has said, I will not commit to a standalone vote on extending the tax credits for ACA. So you've already got one critical part of the party pulling themselves out of the negotiation, or at a minimum, not committing to keep the promise that was made to get those Democrats to change their vote. That's a big I told you so, because we said in the very beginning, you can't trust the Republicans to stand on their word. The other thing that's happening is even more dishonest and disgusting. Remember when the Republicans made sure that a case was taken all the way to the Supreme Court to overturn Roe v. Wade, and that happened? And the critical argument that they made at that time was that states' rights should override everything else. In other words, let the states decide on a state-by-state case where women's reproductive rights should be valid and where they should not. And we fought this battle, we lost, and what's happened? Well, we've had women losing their lives literally all across the country as a result of not being able to get even basic reproductive rights. Now the Republicans are coming back and saying, hey, remember that deal we struck with you to reopen the government and have a standalone vote on ACA? Well, it's not going to be standalone without some riders. And one of the riders that we want on there is to have control over how the states spend their dollars on women's reproductive rights. So they're throwing states' rights out the window. We already aren't able to spend ACA dollars on reproductive care, and now they want to see the same thing happen at the state level, and they're saying they're not going to hold a standalone vote on ACA tax credits if they don't get it. They're already breaking their word in advance before the deal is even passed. The other thing that's happened really should get an Oscar for the Senate Republicans that participated in the event. Maybe you remember about a month ago in a Judicial Committee hearing, there were Republicans sitting in there claiming that their phone records had been hacked and bugged as a result of the investigations into January 6th. Now, of course, this was an absolute lie. Nobody's phones were bugged, and nobody was listening in on conversations or seeing the transcripts of text messages. These were simply records that were asked for by the Department of Justice and subpoenaed that showed the basic call detail on their phones. Why? Because Josh Hawley was giving fist pumps to the January 6 rioters that were trying to overthrow the government of the United States of America, and the Justice Department, while investigating the president's role in that, wanted to know what politicians he was calling in the House and the Senate. Now understand something. They weren't bugging their phones. They weren't recording conversations. They weren't reading text messages. They were simply looking at the same records you get on your phone bill to see who was being called and who wasn't. And the senators that carried on this Oscar-worthy performance, claiming that their phones had been hacked and bugged, they know that. They absolutely know that that's a lie. What did they get into the new reconciliation bill? You know, the one where we were going to reopen the government and promise to have a standalone vote on ACA tax credits? Well, they hit a little measure in there that says they can sue the federal government for asking for those phone records. And not only that, they can be awarded $500,000 for every instance of that request being made. Now, I want you to think about something for a second. They've got a personal phone and a personal email. They've got a Senate phone and a Senate email. They may have a political phone and a political email. That alone is 6 different instances where they could sue for $500,000 in order to get compensation for a bug or a hack that never actually happened. They can get rich off of the process of reopening the government while breaking their promise, get this, while breaking their promise to have a standalone vote on the ACA tax credits. Guys, this deal stinks to high heaven. You need to be raising hell every day about it. Make those calls, send those emails, call your elected official out in person. The more I see this deal, the more I have no faith that it's going to happen after the government reopens, and we're going to lose every bit of leverage we have to prevent 4.5 million people at the end of this year from losing their health care, and the possibility that 15 million people could lose it over the long haul. And that would be devastating for all Americans, but particularly for rural America. So it's time to fight. I know you're tired. I know you're sick of all of this unplanned change, but continue to make those calls, continue to send those emails, and continue to raise hell with your elected officials, particularly the ones that change course in the Democratic Party to vote for this bill, which gives away all of our leverage. Have a great day, everybody.